Well, it's been a big week for banning the internet, James and Rita. We've had the misinformation, disinformation bill, which was put forward a few months ago, turned down, now back. Worse than ever before, thanks to Labor. The coalition appear to be finally standing up against this insanity. Rita, what do you make of it?
Well, thank God we're getting some sense from the coalition, because they have been inconsistent, to say the least, on this issue. Their support of the e-safety commissioner and her role, the e-Karen, has been terribly worrying. And these measures are Orwellian. There's no other way to describe them. What they label misinformation, disinformation, as we saw through the COVID years, just happened to be often the correct information that was inconvenient, and which is now they've come around to accepting. And we saw during that period just how dangerous it is to suppress free speech, to suppress the free speech of experts. There was a world-renowned infectious disease experts who were censored and suppressed when they were questioning some of the insane measures that we took during that time.
Everywhere except on this show.
And we're talking here about Harvard professors, Oxford professors. We're not talking about crackpots on the internet, as they like to mischaracterise.
We had a fair few of those as well. We were proudly.
We love them all.
We love them all.
But this is something that Australians should care about. We just had a Labor MP on this station. It's just saying the most absurd stuff, I've got to say. Trying to say this is for our safety.
Yeah, sorry, Rita. This is a lot more sinister even than you characterize it. The coalition must right now make a firm break with its own past, with Scott Morrison and Paul Fletcher, who were the originators of this horrendous idea. Let's be real clear about what this does here. This turns the ACMA bureaucracy into a ministry of truth. This creates two tiers of free speech. One, for people who are protected. Journalists are protected, academics are protected, others are protected. Another for everybody else, which means citizen journalists, people out there on X, which is what they are terrified of, because, of course, that is what undermines official narratives. They are going to be captured by this bill. And what can't you say? Well, they say that all sorts of things now. This is like communist China. This is like Soviet Russia. If you say anything about public health measures, and that could be, by the way, saying, I don't think the ban on vapes is a good idea. I think that is misconstrued. That could be misinformation. Anything that affects financial markets could be deemed misinformation. That could be saying, hey, I'd like to get some Bitcoin because, in case banks collapse because of the property market falls apart, I'm going to have some hedge. That's misinformation. You could get done for that. This bill protects the elite in our society from being questioned by everybody else. This is a huge threat to free speech. The coalition needs to not just say we're going to vote against it, they need to actively fight against it, and they need to also say, whenever anybody says, oh, well, what are you going to do about misinformation? Say, you know what? We believe in free speech. We think people are smart enough to have the debate and work it out for themselves.
Well, the first thing to be said is that the words misinformation and disinformation are themselves misinformation and disinformation. These words were barely in existence a decade ago. What you actually have is truth or lies. What you have is truth or falsehood. What you have is truth or defamation. What you have is truth or propaganda. The idea that information that is out there has to be monitored by a government and bureaucrats within a government is utterly obscene. Elon Musk has called it fascism. It is fascism. It is the very thing our grandparents, our parents' grandparents and their parents fought against in 2 world wars. The idea that a government is the arbiter of truth. No, a government is there to run, public services and make sure the country runs smoothly. It is not there to determine what is and what isn't the truth. That is for every individual and their own conscience to decide. And we have had always in free societies protections against lies, falsehoods, propaganda, and so on. Ultimately, it comes down to the individual, and governments do not have the right in any situation to tell us as individuals what is the truth. That is our conscience that tells us that.
And daylight is the best disinfectant. So if there is dangerous lies being spread, you counter those lies with the truth. You don't try to suppress it. And we've already had a taste of this. We've had more than a taste, unfortunately, with the e-safety commissioner deciding that a breastfeeding expert saying that men can't breastfeed is something that is worthy of being banned. So we've already had tweets posted in that fashion being removed at the behest of the e-safety commissioner. We know Jasmine Sussex is now being dragged through a tribunal over this issue as well. But before that happened, her tweet on this issue, completely factual, I would add, that yes, men cannot breastfeed, is somehow now controversial. It's disinformation, misinformation. It's not worthy of being in the public square.
Where left-wing propaganda becomes labelled the truth. This is what happens.
Because
that's why I said Orwellian.
Do not let this happen, Australia.
What this is about, it's not just, and let's be real clear, this is not just about controlling what you say and what you read. It is ultimately about determining what you are allowed to think. This goes back to Orwell in 1984, and it's all about this idea that, you know, what the guy said in 1984, the destruction of words is a beautiful thing, and soon people will have no ability to even think wrong thoughts. And we not only had the tweet about the breastfeeding men, but we've also had, remember, the effort by the Karen, the e-safety commissioner, to censor the video of that bishop being attacked in Western Sydney because that might threaten social cohesion. People might think the wrong things, jump to conclusions that the government doesn't want them to about a whole number of topics.
And this is
why it is so sinister.
That's the most dangerous one, when they start talking about something that's a threat to social cohesion. So it doesn't even have to fit their warped ideas of disinformation, misinformation. They can acknowledge it's 100% accurate, but if it threatens social cohesion, if it's an uncomfortable truth, it's an inconvenient fact that challenges policies that they are pushing, then you're going to find yourself in strife. And the way they're going to do it is to put so much pressure, to put such penalties on these social media companies that they're going to abide. They don't want to face these massive daily fines. So they're going to just crack down. And this is an assault on everyday Australians. It's not an assault against us.
And
that's the important point here. This protects the elite.
Absolutely. Now, the reality is, if you sat down and did a count, you would find that during COVID, which Rita mentioned, you got the truth here, this desk, on this show, by these three individuals, more often than you got the so-called truth from any other media source, the ABC or anyone else. You do a fact check on it, you will find that that is the truth. Yet we were slammed for peddling disinformation, misinformation.
Sarah Hanson-Young tried to get us to
absolutely. So this stuff is so insidious, and you will be the victims of it. The Liberal Party must stand against all this and stand for free speech, which supposedly is in the DNA of the party.